and welcome to Conscious Curiosities, where we are empowered to become consciously curious and unlock the wisdom of the universe that lies within us. I'm Maria Luz, your host, an astrologer, certified hypnotist, and developing psychic medium. Today's episode is Need to Jump into Action Toward Those #life goals, Mars in your birth chart. In this episode, all about Mars, the planet, the mythology of the archetype, and its astrological associations. Themes of Mars based on the current astrology, some questions for exploration, how Mars demonstrates taking action toward a goal through the 12 signs. As I mentioned in my last episode on Venus, the astrology has been calling us to review and apply discernment to how we relate to self and others. This is largely driven because the nodes of the moon, which focus our attention on evolution through learning soul lessons, have been in Libra, which is ruled by Venus, and Aries, which is ruled by Mars, since July of 2023. And they will be there until January of 2025. So we have a little bit more time to delve into this focus. The recent lunar eclipse in Libra on March 24th, followed by the total solar eclipse in Aries on April 8th, further highlighted this theme. And in addition, Chiron is an asteroid which signifies where we have a core wound that may not be obvious to us because it is so core, yet it's one we need to work on in order to become whole and to be of service to others. This asteroid, Chiron, has been in Aries since March of 2019. And why do I know this? Because my Chiron is in Aries. And Chiron has passed over this same point to my natal Chiron at 9 degrees Aries 4 times since that March 2019 first entry into Aries. And it's gone over this point that many times because it's been in retrograde. So everyone who has Chiron in Aries has been experiencing these various shades of revisiting this core wounding. And I am no exception. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about that later on in the episode. If this topic of Mars sparks your interest, I'm giving a workshop on Mercury, Venus, and Mars in the birth chart on April 20th, so not too long after this episode airs. It will also be recorded if you want to register and just catch the recording later. And it's only $25, so not a huge investment. In the meantime, I'll get started with the astronomy. Mars was named by the Romans for its god of war because of its reddish hue, which kind of looks like spilled blood. It is red because the iron minerals on the surface oxidize, and another word for oxidize is rust. So that's the color that gives the reddish hue. It's the 4th planet to the sun, and if Earth were the size of a nickel, Mars would be the size of a raspberry. And its orbit is 687 Earth days, and its rotation is really close to Earth's rotation. It's 24.6 hours, but it has this egg-shaped or elliptical orbit around the sun, so its seasons are much longer than the Earth's, and they also vary in length, unlike our seasons, which are equally in 4 different 3-month periods. And it is a dusty, cold desert with a very thin atmosphere. It has seasons, polar ice caps, extinct volcanoes, canyons, and different weather. And as you probably know, we've sent Mars rover missions to explore it multiple times. So we have a lot of data on this planet. Now, moving on to the mythology. As I mentioned, Mars is the Roman name for this god, and the Greek name was Ares. Ares is how it's spelled. Very close to Aries, but I think pronounced a little differently. So this Greek god, Ares, was one of the Olympians, and he was the son of Zeus and Hera. He was the god of war, courage, and battle lust. So that blood red of the planet, reminiscent of these attributes of the god, and that's why the Romans named the planet after him. He's symbolized by the helm, and the helm is that pointy metal type of head covering that you see. You'll know it if you see it in those Greek movies. Like, I can't even think of one of them because I don't really watch them, but you would know it if you saw it. And his sacred animal is the serpent. And he appears to have been quite impulsive. He had an affair with Aphrodite, otherwise known as Venus, whose husband, Hephaestus, was not too happy about. And he trapped Ares and Aphrodite in a net and shamed them in front of all the other gods of Olympus. He also changed one of his daughters and her husband into serpents and sent them off to an island. He had a lot of war shenanigans too, as he is said to have just delighted in war for the sake of war, and he reveled in slaughter. Now on to the astrology. The basic associations: Mars rules Aries. So Aries, Aries, the season that we are just coming out of, actually. And in Hellenistic astrology or ancient Greek astrology, Mars also ruled the sign of Scorpio, which in modern times is ruled by the planet Pluto now. In Hellenistic astrology, they also have a system of which planets are what's called exalted into the different signs. And for Mars, its exaltation is in Capricorn and its detriment is in Cancer. It corresponds to the first house, which is Aries' house, and it's about the self. The key phrase is I am. The element is fire, and the body functions and associations are metabolism, muscular, adrenal, any function that's really around protecting, inflammation, elimination, sexual function, arousal, blood, marrow, bile, and the head. And it's associated with the solar plexus, which is our third chakra. And then what Mars represents is really our drive to take action. I guess if there's any one word I would hang on to, it would be action. So it represents our drive to take action toward our personal or our ego's self's desire. It's like that first growth of spring in that it has to aggressively burst out. It doesn't really know what's above the surface of the ground. It just has to do it. And then it has to survive. So think of Mars energy in that same way. And it represents the sex drive, which is, again, basically to implant the seed. And back to that goal piece of it, I want to be clear. Mars doesn't actually formulate the goal. The sun does that. So your sun's placement really comes up with that conscious goal or the ego goal, but Mars takes the action. So the moon provides the emotional drive because we have to get on board emotionally, and then Mars really puts it into physical action. And I know, at least from my life, when I haven't had those things in alignment and say I just jump and take action when I'm not aligned emotionally or with my conscious goals, it doesn't go very well. And I know that because my moon is actually in the sign of Aries, and my Mars is in the sign of Leo. So there's just a lot of fire happening there. My sun is also in Leo, by the way. And as the ruler of the sign of Aries, when you look at Aries, it because it has that survival instinct, and it is the first sign of the zodiac, or I guess if you look at the houses or the zodiac as a journey going from 1 to 12, it is that childlike stage. And it doesn't layer on this complexity to its survival agenda. And it can lend decisiveness, yes, to take action, but that can also be impulsiveness. It just depends on the situation. So like all of the signs, there are these kind of distortions or different vibrations depending on how you want to look at it. And this is very much one of those situations where with those, hashtag life goals, it can very much serve you, and we've got to take action at some point. But again, it doesn't really put the plan in place or formulate much around it. So there's a fine line between decisiveness and impulsiveness. And Aries can make anything a competition. So if you know any Aries suns or Aries moons, they are likely to be competitive, even if it's not, athletic competition. Maybe it's at work, or it's like doing crossword puzzles. And, we all have all 12 signs of the zodiac in our chart. So if you know which house your Aries rules, then that may be the area where you find yourself being slightly competitive. It's energetic, but it's not necessarily like the enduring type. Having been a runner almost my entire life, I think of it more like a sprinter instead of like, the distance marathoner type. Although nowadays, people who win marathons and even ultra marathons pretty much sprint the entire way. And when I was thinking about a song that represents Mars and Aries energy, I thought of that song like, hey, oh, let's go. And that is the Ramones Blitzkrieg Bop. And I put a link to the video in the show notes. And that just, again, it's almost like that childlike energy, and it literally like makes you want to bounce around to it. Now, last week I raised some questions that the current focus on the Libra Aries axis is asking us to examine with regard to relationships to people and resources, because Venus has to do with relationships to people and resources. This week, I offer some questions related to Aries and where we may need to focus on self. And as I mentioned a little earlier in the intro, this solar eclipse and the whole eclipse season and the Chiron sitting in Aries, it's really focused in on my chart because my moon sits at 18 degrees Aries in that solar eclipse, and Chiron was at 19 Aries. And then they're all going to kind of come back this week, the different planets, to meet up there. Not all of the planets, but it's a focus yet again. So I've been living this, and really it did uncover a wound that I just was looking past because it was from my childhood and the relationship that I had fallen into with my mother, where I abandoned myself, and I started realizing I didn't have enough energy to be in that relationship, or at least in the same way that I have been which I think she only has one way that I would be allowed. So it came to this big head, and the day before the eclipse, believe it or not. So I am currently just taking space, and I'm finally feeling what it's like to have all of my energy be my own and be able to use it to help others, which is, what I hope to do by things like this podcast, which empower people to understand themselves and others using this lens of astrology. So that's my journey, and I hope yours wasn't as dramatic. But if it was, I'm sure there's a point to it all. We just have to trust. So the questions I came up with are, and again, you can journal on these. You can pause this, get your journal or your paper, or type it up or whatever, or come back to them. Number 1, I've only put 2 because they are pretty big ones. Am I clear on what it is I desire and the motivation behind it? And sometimes when we continue to ask ourselves the question why, it helps get down to the good stuff. So because sometimes, our first answer about why we're motivated to go after this thing, sometimes that is just the surface answer, but there could be something deeper that we should actually examine so that we are not chasing things that belong to someone else. They may have been from our parents, something they wanted for us, or something that we think would gain us higher status, but it's not. But status isn't really important to us. So by continuing to ask that why, oh, I want that promotion. Well, why do I want that promotion? Oh, I want to make a better salary. Well, why do I want a better salary? That type of thing. And then the second one is, do I stand up for myself when it is required? Or do I habitually abandon myself? And where does that pattern come from? Is there any healing I can do if this is a wound? So that very much comes from my own experience. So if any of this sparks interest, then please go back and you can listen to my previous podcast on Venus, and I have one before that also on Mercury, and before that on your big 3. So feel free to go back, and if you do like what I'm delivering, then please follow my podcast or like it, and I would just so appreciate it if you left a review. I've heard that helps. I don't know exactly why yet, and honestly I haven't gotten to diving into metrics or anything. Like I said, I'm just doing this because I'm hoping it'll help someone. Okay, and share this too if you think it would be helpful to other people. And I also promised that I would go through the different signs of the zodiac and talk about how it moves toward a goal. So I'm going to do that now, starting with Aries. Charge forward. Taurus, take their time, assess impact to resources first. Gemini, investigate all possible goals before settling on one. Cancer, act from a secure home base. Leo, act from the most authentic expression of oneself. Virgo, plan each step and ensure logic. Libra, ensure consensus, aim for a state of harmony. Scorpio, understand the underlying context, the why. Sagittarius, evaluate whether the goal is big enough and could more be achieved. Capricorn, leverage experience, don't waste resource. Aquarius, look at approaching the goal from a different perspective. Pisces, go with the flow, trust it will all work out. Well, that's it. Thank you for listening and becoming consciously curious about Mars with me. If you have any questions, you can email me info@marialuz online. And if you want to consult with me individually, I offer astrology readings, past life regressions, and transformational hypnosis, which you can find on my website, marialuz.online. I also have some group workshops up on the website, and I will be posting more in the next few months. So if you haven't subscribed, please do that so that you'll learn about them just as soon as I schedule them. I put links to social media and the references in the show notes, and I wish you a great day, and you are now empowered to be consciously curious about Mars.